All right, I'm here with Brandel Chamblee of Golf Channel, and he is in Kentucky right now, reporting on the PGA Championship. Brandel, first of all, thanks for joining me, and how's the weather out there today?
Well, I haven't been outside yet this morning, but it looks a little bit cloudy, a little bit humid. Today's supposed to be okay, but chance of thunderstorms in the afternoon. I think that's what we're going to deal with all week. I think we'll be very lucky to get out of here this week without some major storms passing through. But by all accounts, the golf course drains great. They've put in this new zoysia, which can drain better than the old bent here. So I think we'll be in good shape, but the course will be softer than they would like it.
Do you think those soft conditions are going to generate maybe a tournament like in 2014 when the scores were relatively low?
I do. And the fellas that bought this golf course, a couple of them came up on our set the other day, and course superintendent, and they were like, the guys will probably shoot around 10 under par, but then the course is softer than they would like it. So who knows? It could get up to 14, 15 under par. Wouldn't surprise anybody. Even though the golf course is long and it's got some thick rough, it's soft. So the fairways will play wide, the greens will play wider.
Yeah, so we'll get to the golf in a second. I do want to ask you a couple of things. Just, over the last few years, you've kind of become one of the more polarizing media figures, just based on your strong stances on all types of things, LIV. What's that been like for you, that kind of shift into being one of the more polarizing figures in golf?
Oh, I don't know that it's been any different, to be honest with you. I mean, I started working at the Golf Channel in 2004. Somewhere along the way, I became a polarizing figure to some extent, I guess. I'm not quite sure why. My job is to have an opinion. It's to argue for my opinion, and that's what I try to do. I try to find things that I believe to be true, and fight for them. And if people find that provocative, that's fine. I certainly don't try to be provocative. I just try to say what I believe to be true.
So when the LIV threat first appeared, you were strongly in the camp of not taking money from the investment fund, from the PIF. Now you've kind of spoken out recently and changed your mind based on the landscape of golf and how things have been. At what point did you change your mind in determining that maybe it is the best course of action to make a deal with the private investment fund?
Well, I said what I said the other day. I said it last year at the U.S. Open. So, as much as people want to say I said this recently, last year at the U.S. Open, I said the second worst thing that could happen to golf would be if the PGA Tour made this deal. And the worst thing that could have happened to the PGA Tour is if they didn't make the deal. That's unfortunately the pickle that the PGA Tour is in, that professional golf is in, because the Saudis are not going to go away. They can spin the PGA Tour into oblivion. They will be a poaching threat forever. So the best way, as far as I could tell, was to make some sort of deal. Figure out a way to mitigate the influence of the Saudis in the professional golf landscape. They seem to be enamored with team golf, which boggles the mind. It seems to hold no appeal globally. They've been at it for years now, and what have they made? $40,000 in hot dog sales in Australia, and to offset $3 billion. It's not resonating with anybody globally. But they seem to be enamored with it. So, if they could mitigate the Saudi influence and let them play team golf somewhere in the fall, fine. That seems like the best deal that golf could make. But, I don't think it's great for golf that the Saudis are trying to buy the game. I would have never said that it's great for the PGA Tour until circumstances arise where there's just no other course of action. It's unfortunate that Greg Norman and Phil Mickelson, and those are the main two that had the power to make this game better, and they've made it worse. And the reality is, if you're sitting in an executive suite at PGA Tour headquarters, or you're one of these private equity guys, you know, I think that's the best course of action. It's unfortunate, but it's, if you're sitting there and you're looking at all the evidence, it's probably the best thing to do.
So what would you say to someone who would say that this situation was inevitable, and if Jay and others picked up the phone from the beginning, that maybe we could have prevented some of this damage that's happened in the last 2.5, 3 years, and went straight away to the kind of situation that you're suggesting now?
I'd say that they're looking backwards, using hindsight, and acting as if it was an obvious choice. The idea that this was inevitable, nobody would have ever guessed that somebody would come along and irrationally spend money without any interest on a return. Nobody could predict that in a rational world. Nobody. What the Saudis are doing, what they're paying these players for, none of them are worth it. None of them are worth the money that they're getting paid for. None. So who would have ever imagined that or predicted that? And the idea that the PGA Tour was a monopoly is laughable. There were dozens of tours around the globe, and the PGA Tour wasn't just the best. It was the best, like Usain Bolt was the best. I mean, it was by far the best. And the idea that the PGA Tour wasn't benefiting PGA Tour players properly, again, is, look, I mean, I don't think any organization is above criticism and above change. But look how the PGA Tour has evolved since Tiger Woods came on the scene, looking for a way to galvanize interest late in the year after the major championships. The PGA Tour came up with the FedEx Cup, which brings the best players in the world together. Initially, it was 4 weeks. Now it's 3 weeks. The ratings in those events and at the end of the year proved the PGA Tour right. The Corn Ferry Tour came along. That's to support up and coming players. The Champions Tour is still alive and well, strong. That's to support aging players. And in the middle, they take care of PGA Tour players in their prime. They have the best pension program in all of sports, not just in all of sports. So it's laughable to me that anybody could point a finger at the PGA Tour and say that they were asleep at the wheel. Tell me a better sports organization anywhere on the planet than the PGA Tour, especially giving the niche interest in golf, the small interest in golf. I mean, you know, there is very, compared to other sports, it is such a small niche interest in the game of golf. And the fact that the top 3 earners in sports of all time were golfers speaks to the fact of its commercial appeal. So I think the PGA Tour was doing a hell of a job, not above criticism. No business is above criticism, not above, change and evolving. I think the PGA Tour had done all that. I don't think they were perfect. You know, their lack of transparency, I think, hurt them. The fact that they elevated players to a stature where they were unimpeachable on all fronts. You couldn't criticize players if you were a fellow tour member. I don't know that probably wasn't the best course of action for them. But again, nobody could have predicted that somebody would come along and pay hundreds of millions of dollars for golfers that nobody would buy a ticket for. Who again, this is like you selling cars and your closest competitor decides to give them away for free, and you are held accountable for losing your market share. Well, you'd sit in that room and you go, I'm sorry, who in here thought somebody would give cars away for free?
Right.
We're not prepared to deal with irrationality in the business world. So the fact that people want to point fingers at Jay and his crew, is he above criticism? No. Did he do everything right? No. Even he would say, wished he'd done things a little bit differently. But to say he should have anticipated an irrational actor in a competitive business that counts on a return on investment. I think that's ludicrous.
So where do we go from here? Jimmy Dunn just steps down, saying there's no deal, seemingly making any progress at all. Rory tries to get back on the board, is voted, for that not to happen. So if there's no progress being made, where do we go from here? Is it going to be a standstill for the next, multiple years, or is there any way that something gets done?
I don't know that anybody, Matt, knows the answer to that. Not even the people on the board, not the people that are close to it. I've talked to a lot of people that are involved in this. I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that. The big problem, I think, for players on the PGA tours, how do you bring the players that are still eligible for the PGA Tour back into the fold? I don't, as much as you'd love to see them fined because they've damaged the PGA Tour and it cost the PGA Tour, who knows, $100 million, maybe more, which is money that could have been put back into either the purses or the pension. So I don't know that it makes sense to fine them, but there needs to be some penalty. So if they do come back, maybe they can't play signature events. Maybe they have to play events that they had never played before, elevate some of these events. The Nelson, the Colonial, John Deere, whatever, for a year or two. Maybe they have to go back to qualifying school to earn their way back on the tour. Those kinds of things make sense, and I think that's probably where the tour will land, and when they're trying to figure out how to bring these guys back into the fold, and then give the Saudis the fall, and see if they can come up with some compelling aspect of the game to be played elsewhere in the world. That makes sense, but I'm not sure anybody knows where we're going to go. On the one hand, I think the threat of PIF and the Saudis and LIV, it's real. And I think it could damage, and it has damaged and could further damage the PGA Tour. So that's why I say, the best course of action is to figure out how to mitigate their influence and come to some agreement. But that's not to say that I wouldn't love it if the PGA Tour figured out a way to just compete. Say, the hell with you, we're going to compete. You run your tour, which, by the way, nobody watches, and you're losing all of your money on, essentially. You run your tour, we're going to run our tour, we're just going to compete. In essence, the DP World Tour is what it's called now, but the European Tour, it's not like we had all the best players always playing together. If you go back to 80s and 90s, and the best players were mostly in Europe: Greg Norman, Nick Faldo, Ian Woosnam, Jose Maria Olazabal, Bernard Langer. Those were the best players in the world, and they played in Europe, and they would come over and play in the majors. It's not like we've always had the best players in the world playing on the same tour. Ernie Els played all over the world. Retief Goosen played all over the world. Lee Westwood, Darren Clark, it showed up sporadically here and there. So let's compete. Would be, I would certainly applaud that. Let's compete.
So if that were the case, those players in the 80s on the European Tour were playing in majors, would you want these LIV players to be able to play in majors so you could see the best of the PGA Tour compete against the best of LIV?
Well, the format for LIV is just stupid. There's no other word for it. It's just stupid, ill-contrived. 54 holes, 54 players, start willy-nilly here and there. Nobody winning a golf tournament should finish on the third hole on some par 3, while his closest competitor playing the 17th hole or the 18th hole. That's a par 5. I mean, it's a laughable concept. So there's no way to judge the talents of these players out there. You look at their data, and again, their data is laughable. It's very hard to hit 75% of your greens, and it looks like everybody on their tour is hitting 75% of their greens. It's like, who's keeping stats? Who's doing their data? They haven't got their act together. So how do you know who's who's playing the caliber of golf that should allow them into the PGA Tour. You know, there was a way to judge the European Tour. Those guys are playing 72-hole events, tough conditions and windy, and you shoot 15 under par. You think, good gosh, is Ian Woosnam really that good? Shows up at the Masters. You know, Bernard Langer, Jose Maria. Jose comes over to the World Series and he wins by 12. Like, God, these guys are amazing. They beat our butts in the Ryder Cup. These guys are amazing. So there's no real way to judge. So how can you judge them? They went to play in a tour that they knew didn't qualify for world ranking points. So, you know, they want to get in majors. They're going to have to figure out a way to qualify the way Joaquin Niemann did. You know, go play some events that we can clearly judge what kind of player you are. 72-hole events, traditional events that start on 1 and end on 18. The way the course is laid out. So, you know, again, the format of LIV is just not conducive to a judgment of how good somebody is in the clutch or as a competitor.
So speaking of LIV players, this week Anthony Kim comes out and kind of takes some shots at you on social media. What was your reaction to that?
Oh, I don't know. At first, I thought it was a bot, but it's not. It's just somebody who's been bought. I mean, I'm sure LIV's, you know, Norman or Mickelson or whoever else is telling Anthony Kim to you know, take shots at me. You know, I thought it was juvenile. You know, so social media is a perfect place for juveniles to go behave like children. You know, like the ball pit at McDonald's without adult supervision. You know, I at first, but you know, but again, you know, I generally block all those people and block the bots. You don't even know. So this is the thing about social media. The algorithm generates negative comments and negative tweets. That's what it's designed to do, and it just feeds negativity all over the world. It's just a cesspool. There's positive aspects of it for sure, but it's a net negative. And I'm sure Anthony Kim, if you know, look, Mother Teresa would get lambasted on Twitter for something, I have no doubt. And Hitler could probably find positive reasons, positive comments on Twitter if he wanted to. And I'm sure Anthony Kim scrolls and he gets positive comments and he thinks, yeah, these people get me. I'm doing the right thing. And you know, it's just juvenile and sad is what it is. I feel sorry for him.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the golf this week. I mean, Rory's making headlines, you know, for multiple reasons. Scheffler's playing the best golf, you know, of anyone in the world, maybe since Tiger. Starting with Rory, why do you think he hasn't won a major in 10 years?
I just think he can't find the place mentally where he plays his best golf. You know, if you go back and look at what he did from 2000, well, he was just getting started in 2007, but say 2011 to 2014, in that stretch, you know, he led roughly 20% of the rounds he played in major championships. His game has not fallen off, not one bit. He's on paper pretty much the same player he was. He's not quite the ball striker he was from 2011 to 2014. Not quite the ball striker he was, but he's made up for it with his short game around the greens and on the greens. So, you know, he's almost the same player. And yet he's led just 2 rounds, beginning with the 2015 Masters to the 2024 Masters. So I just think that tells you that he can't find the proper way to prepare, the proper way to ease into a round. When he's needed to play his best, he's played his worst. When he's played his worst, he then follows it up with his best golf. You know, that'll tell you that he's just not in the right place mentally. I said last week, and I believe it, that beginning the final round, you know, on Golf Central, I thought, you know, that round could echo. It could influence the way he played not only this week, but the rest of this year and going forward. You know, he needed to go out and dominate the way he did mostly in majors in 2011, 2012, but in winning 2 of them in 2014. He needed to go out and dominate. He needed to play with freedom so that he could get back to walking around and being cocky and not playing. I don't even know what the right word for it is, but playing with some timidity. But I think it's clear. I mean, when you can look at the data, and the data says he's the same player, he's continued to play good for the last decade. Not good, great. Play great. He's finished in the top 10 in majors almost 60% over that span, from the 2015 Masters to the 2020. That's a higher percentage than he had before. He's had a higher win percentage on the PGA Tour. He's won Barden trophies and every other thing that you can think of. So for him not to have won a major championship, and if you go back and look at the 4 best chances that he had to win a major championship, going back to last year's U.S. Open, and then the 2018 Masters, and the 2021 U.S. Open, and the 2022 Open Championship, those 4 tournaments where he shoots 74, 73, 70, 70, and he has 36 putts, 34 putts. It's clear that he just can't find the place where his best golf comes from. He's still got time to do it, but he's 35 years of age, so time is flying by. I mean, it's not May in his career. It's the fall, and winter comes on fast.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch quickly on Viktor Hovland, because after last year's Tour Championship, it looked like he was on the trajectory to be like the best player in the world, or one of the best players in the world. And then he parts ways with Joe Mayo, his short game coach. And now all of a sudden he's struggling again. The swing seems lost. He's going through a swing change, no top 10s on the season. Why do you think that's happening with Viktor?
Well, because golfers are type A personalities. They're perfectionists for the most part. They're really driven, and they want to get better. I understand that. But it's not just happening to Viktor. Look, and I would argue, as much as people want to argue, that the interest level that has sort of fallen off this year on the PGA Tour. So people use that barometer of TV ratings, so if you want to say that, but it's an interest level has been down. I would say it's down. People want to blame it on LIV and the division in golf. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe it's just a simple fact that some of the most popular players in the game have not been playing well. So Rory, until last week in individual tournaments, was off his game because he, swing was changed. He didn't like where it was. But if you can also go look at here, like, well, Ricky Fowler's game, because he was messing around trying to, I'm not exactly sure what he was doing. He went to John Tillery, who was a good coach, but it didn't work for him. So his game falls off. Justin Thomas didn't like the look of his swing. So his game falls off. Jordan Spieth changes his swing and his game falls off. Colin Morikawa switches coaches from his lifelong coach to another coach. Didn't work. His game fell off. Viktor Hovland looked like a budding new Jordan Spieth. And maybe he'll find his way back, but he decides to change coaches and his game falls off. So I used this analogy last night. Back in the day, so 2005, 6, 7, when the play Wicked was ruling Broadway, if you bought a ticket to go see Wicked and Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, you find out that they're not playing Belinda and Alphaba in the cast. I'm sure whoever they replaced them with is very, very good, but it's not Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel. And so I'm sure the interest would go down. When you turn your TV on, you expect to see the most popular and biggest stars doing what they do. And they haven't been there for the most part this year. So I would argue that before people want to say that the game is divided and there's no interest in golf, and because it's divided, that's why there's no interest in golf, I'd say, I don't know. The ratings were up at the American Express when Nick Dunlap won. And the ratings were up big time last week at the Wells Fargo when Rory won. People love stars and stories. And those were two great stories, a great story and a great star doing his thing. So the interest is still there in the game of golf. I don't know any golfer that's not consuming the game nonstop. If they're not at home watching because they're playing, they got this out, and they're watching online and following. I don't know that the world of sport has figured out how to recognize how many people are following sports on this as more and more people are out living their lives, but they're all following sports on their tablets, their phones. So, so Victor Hovland fell victim to, the plague of perfectionism that pervades the PGA Tour. And more often than not, it leads to a downfall in people's games.
So I completely agree with your assessment about the stars not playing well, and that's why the ratings have been down. And like you mentioned, last week, the ratings were through the roof with Rory there. So, that's completely accurate. So the question then becomes, prior to that, Scotty is dominating and winning all these events. So he's not the draw. If we say Rory was and Dunlap was, which is true, then the events that have been down this year are the ones that Scotty is winning. So do you think it's a problem that the world's best player is not a big draw?
I don't know. He seems to be he's not that animated. He didn't run around and air punch, and he hasn't won by 10. But I think if he continues to play the type of golf that he's playing right now, he will certainly play his way to huge popularity. If you go back and you look, Jack Nicklaus wasn't particularly animated or particularly liked by fans when he was upsetting Arnold Palmer's run. But he certainly played his way to popularity over time. There's been loads of athletes that were not demonstrative in victory, that initially maybe didn't have the appeal, but over time, audiences fall in love with them. Scotty Scheffler's got this sort of aw shucks, genuine, look at what I did humor. We've just had the most mythical figure in our sport you could ever imagine. Not only did he win consistently at a rate that nobody could ever conceive of, he won by wide margins. He did it with mind-boggling shots. He never seemed to miss a big putt. And he was the most animated golfer in history, run around greens here when he was running up and pointing at the pole and it goes in. That was in 2000. That's kind of when it really got started. But you look along the way at his heroics, it was like a feeding frenzy for the world of sport. You just couldn't believe this guy. And Scotty Scheffler is just much more humble. I think in time, people will become quite enamored with him. If he carries on playing like this, I think the world of golf will be quite enamored with him. They haven't quite figured him out yet. But humble stars come along. It's good to see in this world of self-aggrandizement, constant self-aggrandizement, to see a humble star come along. I think that's great for golf, and it's great for young kids watching the game, because this sport is supposed to be a civil sport about camaraderie. I used to call it a gentleman's game, gentlewoman's game. It's about behaving properly, and I think Scotty Scheffler is a great example of that. So is Rose, who quietly is doing her thing, but she's stirred the world of golf up. And Nelly Korda is not particularly demonstrative either. She wins 5 times, and it looks like it's a walk in the park to her. But she certainly stirred the interest of the game because she won 5 times in a row.
And it's very well said. So in 2014, we saw the cream rise to the top of the PGA Championship. I think the golf course is conducive to that happening. Do we see the best players duking it out this week, or is it going to be kind of someone from the back of the pack?
Well, the golf course has been, I would say, chronologically blessed in that when they played the 2000 PGA there, it was at a time when the best player who's ever played this game was playing the best golf that he's ever played in his life. And when it was played in 2014, from a win percentage standpoint, it's the second best player over the last 30 or 40 years, because his win percentage is it's double digits. So, and the most popular player, not named Tiger Woods, playing the best golf of his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So the tournaments just happen to fall within that time frame. So if you go to present day, you've got Scotty Scheffler, who's playing even better than Rory was playing in 2014, and not far away from the type of golf that Tiger was playing. So once again, the golf course is chronologically blessed. And on top of that, Rory's won his last 2 tournaments. So the number 1 player in the world's won his last 2 tournaments, 4 of his last 5. Rory's won his last 2 tournaments. So the stage is set for a great battle between the number 1 and the number 2 player in the world. And that, believe it or not, since 2000 has only happened in major championships. How many times would you guess? Maybe you know this. How many times do you think a major championship has come down since 2000 between the number 1 and the number 2 ranked player in the world?
I want to say twice.
Yeah, okay. Most people I would have thought would guess way more than that, but you
set the question up to make it seem like it wasn't going to be that many, so that's why I guess too.
3 times. So the 2000 Open Championship, it was Tiger and David Duval paired in the last group. They were number 1 and number 2 in the world. Of course, Tiger had a 6-shot lead, but after 9, it was cut down to 3. So it was a great back and forth. The 2001 Masters, where Tiger was going for his 4th major in a row. The number 2 player in the world was Phil Mickelson, Tiger. They were paired together in the final round. And actually, when they were playing, I believe it was the 14th hole, Phil and David Duval were within 1 shot of Tiger. Tiger, of course, ultimately won. And now you go to the 2002 U.S. Open, and the number 2 player in the world was Phil Mickelson. They weren't paired together in the final round, but Phil made a run that day, and it got pretty close. Mm-hmm. So that's hard to believe. We're more than 20 years down the road, and there hasn't been a great major championship battle between the number 1 and the number 2 player in the world. And I think we can all come up with numerous scenarios where that transpires this week, which is, a pretty exciting proposition as we sit here on the eve of the championship Wednesday.
You've spoken highly of Brooks Koepka this week. Would you put him in that category as someone who could battle it out with the top 2?
100%. I think I'm remiss in not including him in the mix. Look, unfortunately, they're playing LIV, so we don't know what type of golf he's really playing. He finished 45th at the Masters. He certainly didn't look like he wasn't sharp there, but he's won on LIV since then. But again, you just don't know. So we'll see. I hope so, because I think the game's more exciting when Brooks is in it. I love watching Brooks play. I love his, there's room in the game for all these types of personalities. So as much as I love the civility and humbleness of Scotty Scheffler and Jordan Spieth and Xander Schauffele, I also enjoy the arrogance of Brooks Koepka. There's no other word for it. It's just arrogance. And, the confidence, to see him walk around and, in essence, beat his chest everywhere he goes and show his biceps. It's good seeing. It's good. And he makes golf look so damn simple. It's ridiculous. And he, hits it 9 miles, makes clutch putts. He's a great chipper. I love watching Brooks Koepka play. And I don't really know him, but I think he's a pretty funny guy. And as far as I can tell, he's a pretty damn nice guy. So yeah, I like Brooks. I want to watch him play. He and I, whatever, he takes shots at me. It doesn't bother me. I think he's pretty funny most of the time when he does it.
All right, last guy I want to touch on here, and we're talking about all these different eccentric personalities, and this is one of them. And this is the guy I think has a real chance to win this week. Bryson DeChambeau, who at the Masters finished 6th, which is his best finish at the Masters. So you could argue that this course is a much more suited to his skill set. Then do you think he has a chance this week?
Well, I would push back on that a little bit. The rough here is pretty severe. It's pretty thick. I hope so. Again, I miss a lot of these players that went to LIV. One of them is Bryson. I really miss watching him play. I hope so. I hope you're right, Matt. I hope he plays great. It'd be fun to see. He's an interesting character. You never know if he's going to kind of blow up or be the nicest human being you've ever talked to. I love the fact that he took such a huge risk, but he owned it. You know, it was his deep dive. Of course, he did it with supervision, but it was his deep dive to see how fast he could swing a golf club. And he did it when he was a top 20 player in the world. And he sorted it all out on his own. I mean, I think it's one of the coolest things I think has ever been done in golf, and seismic, because it could and will affect the golfers that come out onto the PGA Tour, because they saw what Bryson did and they thought, well, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to start diving into the roadmap for distance. You know, I think it had a lot to do with Padraig Harrington picking up speed. You go back and you look at Ben On. Ben On's done something very similar. You know, Ben On is you know, he hasn't won, but Ben On hits it 9 miles. And so, I mean, these players are motivated by what Bryson did. It's like he was the first guy to really figure it all out. So I hope you're right, Matt. I hope he plays great. But, you know, the rough could get him tangled up. Now, you say, well, he won Winged Foot. And I would say, look, you know, Winged Foot was kind of set up in a way where the fairways were so hard to hit that even the straightest hitters couldn't hit enough of them to mitigate the advantages of the longer hitters. So even the straightest of hitters, I think Bryson was, you know, I think he only, you know, he had something like 20 some odd fairways or something. But even the straightest of hitters could hardly find the fairways at Winged Foot. So, you know, you know, you need to set up a golf course in such a way. You can't have widths of fairways that are 1980s width. Mm-hmm. Players hit it much, much straighter in the 80s because they had a wound golf ball and they didn't hit it as long. And that wound golf ball spun more and they could curve it more, so they could play down the left side and curve it to the middle. The golf ball, it's not as easy to move it. And because guys hit it longer, their dispersion rate's higher. So you need to have a little bit wider fairways so the shortest of hitters can find every fairway. The shortest and straightest hitters can find every fairway. And then they can have advantages over the longest hitters. And then you can't have rough. If you're really going to test the best players in the world, you can't have rough heights like you had in 1980 or 84 or 70. They got to be thicker, denser, and higher. There has to be some penalty for missing the fairway. So, you know, again, because of the way Winged Foot was set up, Bryson was able to win because nobody could hit enough fairways to keep him to keep close to him.
Right. If everybody's in the rough, the guy coming in with a wedge is going to have the advantage over the 5-iron.
Exactly. You know, when one of the consequences of the solid core golf ball coming along was it put the straightest of hitters in the rough. So just go on PGAtour.com, go over to driving accuracy, and go down and look at how many players average 70% of the fairways in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And then look in 2005. And then look in 2010. And it'll blow your mind. And so, you know, Phil started winning majors in 2004. I don't think that's any coincidence. I think he started winning majors after the solid core golf ball came along and put everybody in the rough. And so he's like, you guys are in the rough, I'm going to kick your ass. This is my game. I've been in the rough for my whole career. I can go over trees, through trees, around trees, because he's got that amazing creativity. And Phil's an underrated iron player, phenomenal iron player, great out of the trouble. But you know, one of the most, if you put the top 40 players of all time on a list and rank them in terms of accuracy, he would be 40th. You know, so I think that was one of the consequences of the solid core golf ball, was it allowed Phil to win major championships.
All right, I know you got to go to the golf course soon, so let's finish with. I want to know your pick of who you think wins this week at Valhalla.
I think Scotty Scheffler. I can't imagine it. You know, look, I've never, other than the Tiger Woods era, I've never picked a player so often as I'm picking Scotty Scheffler, because Tiger almost never played bad, and he was almost always in the mix. And Scotty Scheffler, we've been watching this for a couple of years. He almost never hits it anything but great, and straight, and he can curve the ball and do anything he wants with it. So, as much as I loved watching Rory play golf last week, I hope he's in the mix. But there's significant rough this week, and but the course is soft. So Rory plays soft golf courses tremendous. It's not that I don't think he plays fast golf courses great, but he plays soft golf courses the best, by far better. So I hope it's a back and forth between Scheffler and Rory and Brooks. We don't often get to write scripts, but with Scotty Scheffler, he's making it a lot easier. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a little rusty for obvious reasons. He and Meredith obviously just welcomed their first child, but if he's got any semblance of his game, he'll carry on doing what he was doing and beat everybody. Did you see his odds to win the Grand Slam this year? I mean, those are the most insane odds to win the Grand Slam in a year. It's like his odds were 40 to 1 to win the Grand Slam. Like, there's like several players inside the top 10 whose odds of winning just this week are 40 to 1.
Yeah, Justin Thomas, Cameron Young, a bunch of guys. Yeah. So, are you calling first time since 2002? Are you calling a 1 versus 2 battle?
I'm calling it. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I think Rory's going to play his butt off. I hope it's soft. Everything. He's played well here before. Obviously, won here, so he's got good. You think about it. He went into Quahala last week with, good vibes. Having won there before, he felt good. Well, how could he not feel good? He just won. Playing as he's playing as well as he has, swinging the driver as well as he has since 2014, in my view. I watched him last week. I was like, I don't know how anybody can swing a golf club better than that with a driver. I'm going to do a piece tonight because it's fun to do, right? You just look at him and you're like, what's the most beautiful thing in golf right now? Is it not Rory swinging the driver? If that's not the most beautiful thing in golf, I don't know what it is. It reminds me of, are you a tennis fan at all?
Not really.
Yeah, not really. But Federer's backhand is the most beautiful athletic move. And then Simone Biles, when she's up in the air, way up there doing all those flips and then just sticks it. And then the way Muhammad Ali used to dance around, and land punches, it was the most graceful, balletic, athletic. So I'm going to put together a piece. We're putting together a piece showing how absolutely beautiful, athletic beauty Rory swinging the driver is, because what he did last week was just stupefying. So it'll be fun. I hope you're right. I hope it comes down between the 1 and 2. And why the hell not? I'll predict that. Sure, I'll go out on that limb.
All right, that's awesome. Thanks so much for your time. I know you're gonna go to the golf course and enjoy your week, and I'm appreciative you sitting down with me. It means a lot. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate what you guys do at GolfWRX. I go on. I always learn something when I'm reading your website. Thank you.